This is the Lasgidi Farmer Podcast.
Hello, everyone. It's good to meet up with you again. I welcome you to the Lasgidi Farmer Podcast. Today, I want to talk about the food crisis situation that we find ourselves today. Is what I've been rattling the nest and bothering most Nigerians because the cost of food today has gone up. We have seen it in the price of pepper, price of tomato, price of yam, and even in the just concluded Eid festival, price of moving from the average price I used to buy it about 150,000 to 600,000 and above here is really food inflation that we've never seen before. Yeah, our food inflation today reached 40.66% here. That is in May 2024. When we look at the year-on-year increase from the previous year, that's about 15.84%, in which our food inflation as at May 2023 is 24.82%. So when we look at it on a monthly basis, from the month of May to previous months, that's about 0.13% increase. In fact, some sources have claimed that our food inflation this year is even higher than 50%. But whatever of the sources that we are looking at, what we are rest assured is that we are officially among the top 10 worst food inflation by country on the global scale. We just rank behind Malawi and Egypt. The first on the list is South Sudan, followed by Zimbabwe. They have worst food inflation. When you look at the food inflation that we have today, you might be tempted to think that, okay, it started today. No, it didn't start today. It started like 8 years back. Yeah, and I'm going to try to give some history so that we better understand what exactly that we are facing. So right from 2016, we started seeing food inflation start that we've never seen before on a year-on-year basis. We never saw that before. When we saw it was in the year of the global financial crisis in 2008. So what we saw in 2016 was food inflation of 15.7%, in which it was 6.69% on year-on-year percentage change basis. When you look at that period, it was actually the period that we started having, insecurity. And in fact, I'm going to touch on something significant on this insecurity, but I have to just look at that and then fast track it forward later. So that was the year it all started. Or we've had far worse inflation before 2008, judging by what we've had with headline inflation, not looking at food inflation itself, where in 1992 we had about 31.58% inflation. 1988 we had the worst, 43.22% inflation. So if you have a general inflation that is this high, then you know that the food inflation that is a major component of the general inflation is definitely going to be high as well. This year or last year, the headline inflation is usually comprised by food and beverages to the tune of 17.59%, followed by housing, water, electricity, gas, and others at 5.68%, and then the clothing and footwear, which is 2.6% here. Then back to the history of our food inflation here. In 19 August, we had the thought of border closure. We went about it partially in August, then fully in October 2019. So year-on-year food inflation reached 13.2% as at that time, and later in December same year it got to 14.7% here. I was actually one of the people that argued for strategic banning and strategic importation, because it was actually crucial for us to foster domestic production, whereby we reach a level of food sufficiency that guarantees food security. Yeah, but we had to have a kind of plan, that guides our action, not just from this spontaneous thought. We had a case whereby we didn't have this of a master plan and strategy for how we are going to go about it, but we just went fully about the border closure, and the prices of those things that are dependent on importation went up fully without domestic production able to cushion the impact. So one of the problems that we had then is that we didn't think about the short term and the long term impact these measures that we took were going to have on the lives of the people here. We didn't put in place relief that would help people, go through this period. So we had irreparable impact on people's life and livelihood. So the prices of items, commodities like rice, chicken and all that soared and compounded what we saw from the insecurity period. Yeah. So after then, shortly was in April where we had, the coronavirus pandemic. But it wasn't the coronavirus pandemic that solely drove food price, but that the way that we went about, addressing, seeking to prevent, control coronavirus, we went just fully on measure without thinking about the impact it was going to have on the food supply chain here, whereby how does food come from the north to the south. So when we cut short this supply chain, we had a case whereby the demand was higher than the supply, and it triggered higher prices that didn't tend to go down to till today. From December in 2019, when our food inflation was 14.7%. So later during the COVID period, it reached 15%. And it was later onward that food started taking bulk of budgets of Nigerians. About 2019, yeah, we had Nigerians spending 22.8 trillion on food items, which amounted to 56.7% of total household expenditure. That was quite much. And it wasn't that Nigeria was spending much, maybe like more of their disposable income on food, but just that foods became costlier and we're taking more than they would take from household budget. I hope you understand that analogy. After the coronavirus pandemic, we had the issue of the Russian-Ukraine war. Yeah. So it significantly affected agro commodity supply chain. It affected it on a global scale. The use of fertilizer was already low in Saharan Africa and even Nigeria, between 17 to 135 kg per hectare. And having this kind of global destruction would normally have a national impact. Ukraine and Russia supply bulk of the world's fertilizer, specifically for Africa, providing 37%, 17%, and 14% of Africa's potassium, nitrogen, and phosphorus needs. So, if conflict of such, there will definitely be a problem. In 2023, the price of fertilizer in Nigeria increased by 80% and even by 100% in some countries like Gambia. The problem now is that it's not like we do not have fertilizer plants, to make our fertilizer. During the time of Buhari, we made significant $121 million investment in fertilizer plant that drew production capacity to 3 million metric tons. But the problem was that we didn't have the core production ingredient, production facility blends ingredients procured from other countries, like Belarus, Russia, Ukraine, with huge deposit of potash. That is one of the macroeconomic events that added to rising food prices. After the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war on our food supply chain, also we had the cash crunch problem. The government at that time was moving towards cashless policy, yeah, and money in circulation had to be reduced. And in that period, farmers lost about 30 billion naira with irreparable impact on agricultural production, because a lot of agricultural farms and farmers, that couldn't bear not having cash went bust, so they couldn't produce and could not come back to the production arena. We had issue of rate volatility, naira depreciation. The fresh subsidy particularly impacted the farmers. Much of our operation is run on diesel to irrigate our farms, to provide lightings and medicate our livestock. When you have the price of diesel go up, it's going to have significant impact on the production of farmers and the final retail price at farm gates. Much of the inputs that we use for production are imported, and when you have the exchange rate volatility and higher exchange rate, you would see changes. With what I've presented so far, it's not just that food crisis and the soaring price of our food started today. It started since 2016, if not even way beyond that. Yeah, but it helps us to contextualize things. There's been argument that is the food situation that we have today, worse than we had previously. We cannot rule out the influence, the subsidy removal and the depreciation of the naira currency had on food pricing. When you look at just in the period Tinubu assumed office in 2023 last year, you would notice some changes. Before then, the month-on-month food inflation changes between 0.1% to 0.3%, and even right till May when Tinubu assumed office. So what after May, the month-on-month change rose to 0.4% in June and higher 1.3% in July, 1.7% in August, before decelerating to between 0.6 and 0.9%. But it never went back to what we had before May, from February to April, where the monthly inflation rates range between 0.1% and 0.3%. Thus, even when the food crisis that we find ourselves today didn't just emerge, it's been compounding since 2016, it would be right to say that the events in the last year significantly increased our food prices and eroded our food security. Looking at the data that we have, because just between May 2024 and May 2023, the year-on-year monthly inflation difference is about 16%, which is greater than just the inflation figure that we had in 2016, that's 15.7%. And when we look at the year-on-year food inflation change between 2015 and 2016, it was just 6.6%. And this was, even when it was high at that time, we never saw anything like that. When we saw something like that was in 2008 financial crisis, that we saw 6.19%. So when we look at the prices of food just last year and this year and compare it with the past, we see significant difference just from last year to this year, and this year alone is far higher than what we've had previously. I'm looking at some of the food that we eat, like 50 kg of rice in 2015 was 10,000 naira, and in 2022 it goes for 30,000 naira, and a kg of chicken 1,000 naira in 2015, 22,200 naira in 2022. Also, big baskets of fresh pepper, fresh tomato in the range between 10,000 to 11,000 in 2015, and now 17,000 in 2022. In fact, when we look at just between 2023 and 2024, it's been a very big upswing. Looking at the February figures year on year from 2023 to 2024, same basket of tomato that we sell was 17,000 naira in 2021 was 20,600 in 2023 February, and which rose to 29,700 in February 2024. And when we look at the bag of rice, also that was 30,000 naira in 2022 was 36,000 naira in February 2023, and rose significantly to 75,000 naira in February 2024. Then when we look at in 2024 alone, just between April 2024 and May 2024, the same basket of tomato, which was 46,500 in April, sells for 60,000 60,000 naira in May. The bag of rice selling for 65,000 naira in April sells for 78,000 naira in May. And pepper is worse. A bag of pepper in April went for 66,950 and in May 120,000 naira. What does all this explanation have given help with? It helps with understanding the issues in the sector. It helps with understanding how our food situation arrived at this point, and looking at some crucial macroeconomic events that have had impact on what our food situation presently is, and it helps in understanding the problem and also providing solution, because we've had a case whereby even from the table of those who are in charge of our agriculture sector, agriculture portfolio, and making the necessary actions, to make things better, do not fully understand these dynamics. We see them taking actions that are haphazard, or taking partial actions, or taking actions that they are not really sure of. Beyond that, also it also helps us to reposition our thinking, our minds for solutions, because I've had a lot of people lamenting and saying, no, there's nothing that we can do about this food situation. And also some people giving up, taking the defensive approach, like recommending that we switch to lower value or food ingredients that are not normally the preferred ingredient that we use for cooking. An example is that when we make stew, we use tomato, pepper to make our stew, and we have this kind of trend that people are choosing to cook their tomato, their soup rather, stew with cucumber, blended cucumber. Cucumber itself is not nutritious or healthy food here. It's good, but is that what we normally use to cook? No. So when you look at the definition of food security itself, is that not just about having access to food, but you must have access to nutritious food and preferable food. In fact, some definition use naturally preferred food. So when issues as this arise, then our food security is threatened. And even when we talk about all this, how our food situation has come to this, it is important to understand our food crisis, the dimension in which it manifests. So I'm going to talk about the very different ways in which it manifests that people do not really know. Maybe they know some part, they don't really know some part. I'm going to give crucial examples so we better understand what is being said here. So number one is that we are not producing as we used to produce. And number two is that when we produce, even when we are not producing as we used to produce, bulk of our production goes to waste. And number three is that we are not producing to our potential. So we're going to start with the number one, that we are not producing as we should produce. Let's just take example of tomato. Tomato is a very fantastic crop that we grow naturally. In fact, at the peak of 2015 or 2016, we did over 4 million metric tons, but it has since declined to about over 3 million metric tons here. So that's a case that we are not producing as we should. So, but why are we not producing as we should? One of the important factor contributing to that is actually insecurity here. So I think it's very important to actually address this insecurity issue, because we have recently where a lot of people have argued about insecurity and is detracting action to be taken. Some people say that insecurity is not really our problem. It's not as it used to be. Security in the south is not as it is in the north. So we have to decipher these things. A lot of people have said that we are not serious. It's not insecurity that is the problem. Yeah, fine. What would we have come to see based on what farmers have said for themselves, and the impact on production that insecurity have had on farmers' capacity, is that 50% of production problems for farmers actually comes from insecurity. They are not able to go to their farms. Even when they are able to go, they have to pay levies, and these levies are added to the final retail price of agricultural produce this year, which doesn't help well for the already risen price of foods in the market. So this is one of the challenge there. So I want to give a bit of statistics here so we better understand the nature of insecurity. Right from the time before Buhari assumed office here, about 35,000 people have been killed. So this terrorism banditry, started way before Buhari from Jonathan's regime. But in the first year of Buhari, about 28,000 people were killed. And then between 2019 and 2023, we've had about 36,000 people killed rather. So just in the time of Buhari alone, we had over 63,000 people killed. But when we look at time of Jonathan and the time of Buhari till 2023, then we have about 98,000 people killed. That's close to 100,000. Yeah. So in 2017 was when we had the least killing, about 4,600. In 2021 was when we had the worst killing, about 10,575. But the death toll declined, say in 2022 when we had about 9,079 scores. So what we've had is that the killing trends decelerated, but it's not enough to say that we still don't have the impact of insecurity, because we had a lot of farmers abandon their farms. They have this fear of going back. I think it was in 2021, 2022 and 2023 where we had more than 100 farmers killed, rice farmers, and we had several farmers killed across the northern region, which triggered about 78,000 farmers abandoning their farm. So when you look at the impact that these 78 farmers that left their farm is going to have, that it's going to be quite significant. So what can we take from these statistics that I've presented so far is that the security is not as it used to be, yes, but the security still has lingering impact. Yeah, so that's one of it. But we'll still come back to talking about the potential solutions to insecurity. So let's move quickly to not producing how we should produce, but still half of our produce going to waste. And so I'll just take tomato for example, fruits and vegetables which are highly perishable. So every year we produce 3.8 million tons as at the latest statistics in 2020, 3.8 million metric tons of tomatoes. So half of this is wasted from the combination on the farm, at harvest, over harvest, and across supply chain. And when it gets to end consumers at the household level, at the supermarket level, 50% are wasted. So when you divide the 3.8 by 2, we have 1.9 here. Our demand for tomato is 2.2 metric billion tons. So when you remove the 1.9 metric tons that is left after waste, you see that there's deficit left to meet our demand. So that's one of the problems that we have. But why is it that we have this kind of waste? So we have issue of pest and diseases. I'm sure recently the price of pepper and tomato was in the scene, people lamenting, and the minister came out and said, the agri minister came out and said, it's total absolute that is responsible for it. That's actually true, but to some extent, total absoluta is actually a very destructive pest. Especially at its larva stage, the caterpillar that they eat the leaves and cause about 80% to 100% damage to tomatoes. Yeah, just last year it caused about 1.3 billion naira loss to farmers, and destroyed 300 hectares of farms in it. But is that the only problem that we are having that is causing the tomato crisis today? No, the total absolute absolute problem start today. No, it has started way since 2015. Ravaged a lot of farms across the north. Came to the south, to the west, also destroyed farms, and it single-handedly drove up the price of tomato by 500% then, which is one of the reasons why we have price of tomatoes and pepper still high today. So what are some of the problems that we have? Okay, we have the case of pest and disease on the farm. We have the case whereby farmers produce and they don't have access to the market, or they produce and maybe because it's not demand driven, or they overproduce, there's glut in the market and they have no access to storage processing facilities, or have knowledge on simple preservation methods that they can use to preservation method or processing technique that they can use to extend the shelf life of their produce. Yeah, that's why you have tomatoes going to waste, and we spend about $1 billion importing tomato paste yearly, when we could actually have a lot of value: tomato paste, tomato puree, tomato sauce, tomato flakes, dried tomato, sun-dried tomato, dried powder tomato. We could have all this and retain earnings within. You don't have waste. Food is efficiently distributed and everyone gets something to eat. So this is one of the problems. Yeah, and another problem is that after harvest, moving tomato across the supply chain, you have a lot of waste going on there due to the nature of our roads, due to the nature of the vehicles we use for transporting the tomatoes not being refrigerated, whereby if the vehicles get damage on the road, the tomatoes stay for days and they start rotting out. Or so at this juncture, we understand that there is no proper agro-haulage service that conveys tomato down from the north to the south. Another problem that we have is that even along the supply chain, the movement of agricultural commodities are subjected to multiple and illegal levies that end up adding to the final retail price of tomato that will come from the north down to the south. I was reading a report whereby to move 30 tons of tomato, this report was as at 2023, it cost 1.3 million naira to move 30 tons of tomato from Kano to Lagos. So these are some of the things that we're thinking about if we want to find solutions to the food crisis that we find ourselves. So we talk about that half of our food being wasted, then we want to go to the case of not producing as we should produce. Yeah, that's actually very important. We have the land, we have the weather, we have the workforce, we have diverse agroecologies that enable us to produce different array of foods, crops, raise different types of animals and all that. But much of our production increases has been seen by putting more land under cultivation, using more resources than we should, thereby wasting resources, generating greenhouse gases, warming up the planet, destabilizing the climate, That's one of the things that we have. But I'm going to put statistics to that to help us better understand what is it I'm talking about here. Taking for instance, tomato. I like to use this example a lot. Number one is that tomato is what we readily eat, what is readily available, and what is familiar to us, and what we use in our different households for our different dishes here. So tomato, the hectares that we use to cultivate tomato in Nigeria is about 900,000 hectares. So from these hectares is where we have the output of 3.8 million metric tons here. So for context, we are the second largest producer of tomato in Africa after Egypt. Yeah. And Egypt itself is now using 20% of our 900,000 hectares to produce over 6 million metric tons of tomatoes. That means there's a whole lot of inefficiency, lack of productivity going on here. Let's look at for cassava as well. We are the second largest producer of cassava in the world after Brazil. We use about 6.5 million hectares to produce 50 million metric tons of cassava, which we could be doing over 100 million metric tons. Yeah, so yield per hectare is one of the lowest in the world. Why we are the largest producer of cassava, why we are the leading producer of cassava in the world after Brazil, we are not even among the leading exporter of value-added cassava products in the world. We have countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore, Brazil, US, China, all of them leading us. Yeah, which shouldn't be. So we've talked about all the problems now, the intricacies, food crisis has come to be, the classical and contemporary issues. So what then is the solution? Yeah, this is the part that I love most, because I don't want to belong to the class of people thinking that we can't do anything. We have to take a defeatist approach. We have to substitute for food and remain malnourished, not having access to our culturally preferred food. I don't subscribe to that. So what is the solution? I think this is actually very important, and to help the people in the agric ministry actually understand what we can do about this, because there was a recent space on X platform that we did. We had the special advisor to the Minister of Agriculture attending, wanting to share knowledge with everyone, understand what is going on, take meaningful advice to the minister that informs evidence-based action, and this is actually very good. So what am I going to advise? You have to start with some of the things that I've laid down, from what is impacting us not being able to produce as we used to produce. Is actually the issue of insecurity here. So I, is the agri minister, meant to go about insecurity? I actually understand that the agri minister does not have power overseeing to insecurity, but I'm thinking that you could leverage stakeholders, leverage political ties, leverage access to to the legislative arm to actually rally support to see to insecurity challenge, being close to the FG, building evidence for the FG to see why insecurity is a cancer, is a leading problem for why we have the food crisis today, and why the FG must take the book by the horn and see to his end. Leveraging that, I'm also expecting the ministry and the agri ministry to actually establish summit talks, discusses, events on insecurity, impact on agriculture, to actually create a kind of brainstorming session to create holistic, collaborative effort towards addressing the food insecurity problem led by insecurity itself, where the minister endeavors to exploit ties in states, in the states across the federation, with the commissioners for agriculture across the states, with the governors, establishing local forces to see to insecurity rather. So this is one of the ways that we can actually go about insecurity, and also trying to see how we can boost rural economy, because what we've seen is that bandit groups, they are able to pay way higher than the people, inhabitants of the rural economy would actually earn. They are induced, monetarily induced. This problem is of the wage for labor, minimum wage across the state is still very low, and there are not much opportunities in the rural part. So we have to invest meaningfully, invest facilities there, invest facilities like ICT, market, portable water, electricity, siting of schools and all that makes rural life a point of a destination for investment, for migration. We don't have people migrating from the rural part to the urban part, whereby the population of people producing our food is dropping and they come to congest the cities where food production is not taking place, lay stress on the resources in the urban region, and then we have to cater for a big population here, and we don't really want that. So we want to make things stable in the rural regions, position rural economies. Rural economy is actually very important in boosting national economy. Most of the resources that are used in other sectors and used nationally are actually, produced and supplied from rural regions, rural economies. So that is very important to see to. So after we have seen to that, we have to look at subsidizing production for farmers. This is actually important too, because I've seen this debate flying here and there, and this distrust, mistrust with farmers. We've given them subsidized inputs. We've supported them over time, and they are fixing price. They are not producing enough. Many of them are taking money to marry wives, doing what is not for the money given. So I need to talk about this also. Let me give a brief start on. Media past administration is actually one of the administrations that have given farmers immense, subsidies. It gave farmers to the tune of 1.12 trillion naira that was disbursed to 563 anchors. So about 5 million farmers benefited from these. Farmers that cultivated different grain cereals and legume cereals as well, and so of the 1.12 trillion naira disbursed, 670 billion naira has been repaid, but 450 billion naira is yet to be paid, reported by the Apex Bank. But if we had to go by the report of the International Monetary Fund organization, reports by about 75% of this fund hasn't been repaid. So we have a case of non-performing subsidized instrument given here, and there's all reason for people to contemplate, to be speculating whether money given or instrument given aren't using for what supposed to use. But in my findings, I found that many of the so-called farmers that received the instrument are not farmers, and also the farmers that received the instrument aren't able to pay back. Bulk of them, lamented a harsh economy in which they operated. This is actually very reasonable in the sense that seeing, the impact according to what I've explained so far in the macro environment, the impact of the depreciation of naira, the impact of removal of fuel subsidy, impact of insecurity, impact of rising price of inputs and all that. So this is what we have, and it's actually true. But for we to now say that, oh no, because of this we are not going to fund farmers again, this is actually going to be the biggest downfall we have with food production, because what we have is that a lot of farmers have left the farm. Looking at the statistics from the poultry sector, according to the National Association of Poultry Production in Nigeria, during the period of during the challenges that we've had in the past 4 years now, that 50% of participants, the farmers, have left the sector. So We don't want a case whereby we start, we make the remaining farmers that are dodged, and still producing to leave. So it's going to be a big blow to domestic production, if we want anything to be remaining of domestic production at all. So we really need to give farmers, our subsidy is actually one of the lowest in the world. So we have to improve it. What we have to do is actually establish a verified and verifiable list of farmers, whereby we know the farmers, we are rest assured of the farmers, and the instrument given is actually going to materialize. We know who to hold and all this. We can actually establish a verifiable list of farmers by, going through the states. They have their ADP. Their ADP have list of their farmers. Although all these things still needs cross-checking, but it's a very good way to go. We have the non-governmental organization also that establish a verifiable list of farmers, and where there's lapses, we can establish an independent body to help us conduct survey of farmers to be able to verify the actual number of farmers that we have here. And also we can work with associations, unions of farmers to actually know who our farmers are, and we track farmers through this union, through this association, through the heads of this association, unions, and different groups here. So that's one way to go about it. The borderline is that we must keep giving farmers subsidy and must try to find a way to make what they use to produce subsidize. It's not just about giving money. How about the input? How about the energy? How are we going to facilitate cheap energy for farmers to work with? Bulk of what is pushing cost of production for farmers is actually food inputs and energy input, especially for farmers in the area where maize scarcity and price of maize and soybean and other trace and macro elements, have driven up prices of maize and soybean significantly, affecting retailing price of chicken, retailing price of poultry foods, retailing price of fish. These are some of the things that we have to on. Is there a way for the agri ministry to work through the federal government and establishing so after this we talk about the waste and spoilage that we see with our foods. We have to help the farmers to access market. The ministry itself can establish linkage between farmers, market, processors, whereby it's not just about wastage, but you're also producing a market for farmers to sell their produces. When they earn meaningful income, they are able to improve their living standard and positively impact their household, their dependents, and their relatives here. So this is one of the things that we want to see. And what we've also seen is the issue of poor handling of the perishables. We want to see to proper handling and storage using the tomato crates and other equipment that facilitates proper handling. And I think that the ministry wants to push for full-scale adoption of tomato crates. When you go to different markets across Nigeria, you see that the raffia basket, the local basket, is still used for storing, moving, and transporting tomatoes. So this kind of basket is not strong enough, and it has protruding structures that scratch, damage, and accelerate spoilage of tomatoes and other perishables. So we want to see to this, and the agri ministry wants to incentivize adoption and use and recommitment to the usage of these instruments and some other instrument that supports the proper handling and movement of perishables that reduces spoilage and wastages here. So that's one of the things that the agri ministry wants to do, and the agri ministry wants to work with extension research unit to get solutions, effective solutions quickly, rapidly down to farmers to help them address issues that has to do with pests and diseases, issues that has to do with farming, where they are able to adopt good practices that stems a load of pests and diseases and all that. So they want to look into that. And the Lagos state government wants to, rather the agric ministry encourage wants to tax commissioners of agriculture in other states, and also through the FG tax states, to actually adopt what is working in other states. Like the Lagos is establishing a food hub here and there, food hub equipped with not just food hub established not just as a place for destination of food from other states, but equipped with storage and processing facilities that help to extend the shelf life of perishables here. So other states can actually adopt this idea. What is being done in other states can be adopted and positively used in some other states here. Don't talking about not producing as we used to produce, and after producing, bulk of our produce is going to waste. We talk about not producing to our potential here, and one of the reasons why we don't produce to our potential is lack of adoption of production enhancing inputs, hybrid seeds and all that. And in many cases, it's not that inputs are not available, just that they are not in the reach of the farmers themselves, either for affordability reason, proximity reason. We have cases where the research units have developed improved varieties, cultivars, strains, and all that, but farmers cannot access them. When you start looking at one of the issues that we have with rice and some other crops like cassava, beans, and all that, has to do with not producing with a hybrid variety. Yeah. We have a case whereby Haiti has produced several improved varieties of beans that is resistant to pests and diseases, adapting to vagaries, extreme weather situation. But we are not having those instruments in the hands of the farmer. So there is a lot of work to do on that, working with the extension units of the nation to facilitate the access of those inputs to farmers. So that's one of the things that we have to work on. When we look at yam, we are the leading producer of yam in Africa. One of the reasons why we are the leading producer of yam, but we've been able to achieve much of adoption of improved yam cultivars, and also influence the incorporation of agronomic practices that improves productivity, production yield that we see per hectare. So this is one of the places that we could actually do better. So after talking about all this that the agri minister can do, I was looking at how we can actually buffer the food security situation. So that, okay, we have in the north whereby people are not really able to produce much because of insecurity, and you can call them some slacks or that. But what about the southwest here? I feel that the southwest really has a lot of potential. Talking about the arable lands, talking about the weather, diverse agroecologies, talking about the population. In fact, I was looking at a statistics recently, actually, statistics of the GDP of the southwest state. Yeah, so we have it led by Lagos, 41 trillion naira, Ondo 5 trillion naira, Ogun 5 trillion naira, Oyo 3.6 trillion, Ekiti 2.35, Osun 2.30. And you look at some key states that have a lot of agricultural potential, lagging behind, like looking at Oyo State lagging behind Ondo and Ogun State, then there's really a problem. Oyo State should really actually be doing very well in agriculture, and agriculture should actually be contributing a lot to its GDP, and that means the GDP of Oyo State is meant to be higher than a state like Ondo. Yeah, and look at Oyo State has about 30,000 kilometers square arable land. That's 80% of its total land is arable. Yeah, it's the sixth most populous state in Nigeria, and this its population is from like 40% young people, that's active workforce, and it has good rainfall, it has diverse agroecologies, you can plant different things, and it has access to Lagos and access to other states. You tend to wonder that what is wrong with Oyo State. I'm not specifically looking at Oyo State within the Southwest. I'm making a case for even other states. Like, why can't respective states look at their strength and leverage their potential? It's a big problem, such that of the problem that we are having at the center is because the states themselves are failing to do nothing, to tap into their inherent potential. That's why I mentioned that the agri minister and the federal minister of agriculture has to tax each state, work through the FG to tax each state, and also directly tax the commissioner for agriculture in each state, to look into their inherent potential relating to agriculture and, make something of it. That's really, 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 really important. Imagine that we have a state like Lagos exploring its fishery and aquaculture potential, of course, and leveraging its population and market size. We have a state like Ogun State also, leveraging its agricultural potential, selling to Lagos, also Ibadan as well, Osun State and all that. There will be like a buffer zone in the southwest whereby food is surplus in the southwest. So when we have issues in the north, we can equitably transport from the south to the north, and when it's surplus in the north, we can transport back from the north to the south. Some of the things that we have to start talking about, we have to start thinking that what really is the problem in the southwest that we are not farming. The insecurity problem that much that is not making us farm. Are we going to say that the insecurity in the south is much worse than the insecurity in the north? That's something that we have to look at. One other thing that I see is that we have to start adopting innovation, add several innovation that can help us grow food without arable land. All we just need is to transport resources that we need for cultivation. Looking at the greenhouse, no much need for arable land. You can use the greenhouse with arable land, although it helps to enhance productivity. You can also use it without arable land, talking about hydroponics, whereby whatever you need and whatever nutrient that you need for production is provided as solution, and you can produce a lot of crops without having to depend on soil. Yeah, these are some of the things that imagine that we push the adoption of greenhouse across the southwest. Although we have good lands, but we have greenhouse to also augment production of the open field. Not only in southwest, we have greenhouse being adopted en masse in the southeast, southwest, and even in the north. Because I've seen cases of greenhouse being established in the north. If that is adopted across a lot of states in the federation, imagine what we could be having with food production. And a lot of this greenhouse system supports different array of crops. The perishables, vegetables, fruits, and all that we require day to day. It's going to help a lot. And for places like the urban areas, or even in the rural parts or arable region where land is good, or there are some settlement areas whereby we don't have arable land for production, we can adopt urban gardening in the likes of sack farm, and you don't necessarily have to use the soil. You just use container, and everyone is planting their own foods. This is what I'm seeing increasingly in urban areas like Lagos. People planting their own food without arable land. Imagine that when each homes produce their own food, they are able to meet, at least to some essence, their household food security. And when you produce pepper and tomatoes, and they are fast growing, you don't need to go to the market. You are able to harvest pepper, tomatoes from your backyard, from your front yard gardening, that can do a lot. And imagine whereby we have this kind of revolution across an urban area, whereby the excess is brought to the market and sold, or is shared among the community inhabitants. The food security of the community is ensured. These are some of the things that we have to be pushing. You don't have to just sit there doing nothing and thinking that there's nothing that has been done, taking a defeatist approach. That's not what is going to move us out of this food situation. We have to be innovative. We have to think outside the box here. This is what we have to be doing. I would implore the agri minister, to look inward. It's not necessarily about, traveling, establishing partnership and all that. We've done enough of partnership. The solution is local. We have to, build trust, address insecurity, build trust so that farmers can go back to production, support them with input to be able to go back to production, be able to continue production, establish that linkage with market whereby their produces are not wasted, produces are not wasted to get to the final consumers. They get moved around the value chain, contributing value here and there where everyone sees margin to be able to maintain a good living standard here. This is quite important. Focusing on the food that we produce best, not necessarily looking here and there. Imagine that if we had looked at just 10 crops since the beginning of this administration and focus on them squarely, 10 crops that we are able to produce, we will be talking about this food insecurity problem. Focus on rice, focus on tomato, focus on cassava, focus on yam, on potato, plantain, focus on pepper, livestock too, ram, goat, cow, sheep, ruminant and other monogastric animals. We focus on them as well. Imagine what would have gone when we see to insecurity. We are able to use these 10 agro commodities. There's no hindrance. We support the producers of these agro commodities. We subsidize input, enhancing information. We establish their linkage to the market. This is going to go a long way. The solution is not that broad, although it's not really that simple, and it's not unachievable, right? So this is really, really important. So we can still retrace our steps. We can still get things right here. If only if the agri minister and agri ministry is going to take a step backward, to just try to re-strategize, establish a plan and follow it squarely. You don't have to do a lot of things. Just, pick few things and do. But I would like to mention at the end of this podcast that for we to achieve food security that touches, every part of the nation, is that we have to put the economic right, whereby people can, get the right jobs and the right amount. There is significant activity for people to create value and earn significant income for their value to be able to maintain their living standard. When you look at food security, like I mentioned previously, it's not just about food availability. Honestly, there can be food available and people still won't have access to it. What's the essence of food being in my proximity and I don't have money to buy that food? You have to significantly invest in improving people's income, their purchasing power, disposable income, that they will be able to, access things, buy food, have a good living standard.